In modern relationships, many men find themselves trapped in a painful and confusing pattern. They watch women pour their energy into men who barely acknowledge their presence, while the men who genuinely care, who text consistently, who try hard to prove their worth, are pushed aside, ignored, or even mocked. It creates a world where emotional investment becomes a disadvantage, and sincere effort becomes something women subconsciously devalue. At first glance, this seems unfair, even illogical, but the truth is rooted in psychology rather than morality. Women do not lose respect for caring men because kindness is unattractive. They lose respect when that kindness comes packaged with availability, predictability, and the absence of mystery. What intrigues a woman is not the man who tries the hardest, but the man she cannot fully read, cannot fully predict, and cannot easily access. She is drawn to the man whose silence carries more weight than another man's constant affection. High-value men understand this dynamic intuitively. They are not cold, manipulative, or heartless. Instead, they possess disciplined boundaries and a sense of self-worth that does not collapse at the first sign of feminine attention. Their silence becomes a form of communication, not a game. Their restraint becomes a signal of value, not disinterest. While most men scramble for approval through endless compliments, validation, and emotional exposure, high-value men do the opposite. Their absence becomes meaningful. Their presence becomes selective. Their discipline becomes irresistible. A woman may not consciously articulate it, but she feels it. A man who is not desperate is a man who is desirable. Understanding this distinction changes everything. It reveals why some men naturally earn respect, without raising their voices, without chasing, without begging for affection. It explains why women lean toward the men who do not fill the air with words, yet somehow make their presence felt more intensely. It exposes the psychological truth that attention is a currency, and the men who spend it recklessly end up bankrupt in the eyes of the women they want most. This understanding is not about learning how to manipulate women, nor is it about punishing them with silence. It is about learning how to protect your energy, how to value your own presence, and how to stop giving away your attention to people who have not earned it. With that foundation laid, we can now begin to explore the deeper psychological reasons behind why high-value men seem to ignore women, and why that behavior often increases attraction rather than diminishing it. The first reason reveals the true cost of a man's attention, and why withholding it changes everything. One of the greatest misunderstandings in modern dating is the value of male attention. Most men treat their attention as something limitless, something they should offer freely to prove interest, sincerity, or romantic potential. They believe that the more messages they send, the more reassurance they provide, the more effort they display, the more a woman will appreciate them. But in reality, this abundance of attention dilutes its impact. Women today are surrounded by constant validation from social media likes to unsolicited compliments from strangers. Because attention is so easy to receive, it no longer feels special. It becomes background noise, a predictable rhythm of male desire that no longer moves her. This is why a high-value man stands out immediately. He does not give his attention freely, nor does he feel compelled to constantly express interest. Instead, he shows his intentions clearly in the beginning, but then withdraws, allowing space, allowing intrigue, allowing her to wonder. His attention has weight because it is rare. His presence feels valuable because it is not guaranteed. He understands that availability can cheapen attraction and that scarcity naturally increases desirability. When a high-value man with options chooses not to chase, it is not a tactic to frustrate her. It is simply a sign that he respects his energy enough not to pour it into someone who has not yet earned deeper investment. Many men mistake this behavior for manipulation, but the mindset behind it is completely different. Low-value men ignore women out of frustration, insecurity, or fear of rejection. High-value men, however, withdraw from a place of strength. Their silence is not emotional immaturity. It is emotional discipline. They do not withhold attention to punish a woman, but to protect their mental space and maintain self-respect. When a woman experiences this type of man, she feels the difference immediately. His distance does not communicate weakness, but power. It suggests that he is not desperate, not easily impressed, and not willing to give himself away cheaply. This is why women often find themselves drawn toward the men who don't flood them with constant messages. She becomes curious about the man who maintains a sense of self, who is selective, who is present, but not overbearing. She senses that his attention carries meaning, and that gaining it is a privilege rather than an expectation. This is the foundation of attraction built on value rather than effort. And as we move deeper into this psychological landscape, the next reason becomes even more revealing. It explains why ignoring only works when it comes from genuine confidence, not performative detachment. Ignoring only creates attraction when it comes from a man whose confidence is already deeply rooted within him. Most men misunderstand this dynamic completely. They believe that simply withholding attention will make them seem mysterious or desirable. But without genuine confidence, their silence feels hollow, forced, and transparent. Women can sense insecurity instantly, even through the smallest pause in conversation or the slightest hesitation in tone. A man who ignores out of fear, self-doubt, or passive-aggressive frustration does not seem strong. He seems weak, avoidant, and emotionally ungrounded. In contrast, the high-value man carries himself in a way that makes his silence meaningful. He approaches women boldly without trembling over the possibility of rejection. He speaks with clarity, looks directly, and expresses interest without apologizing for wanting what he wants. And most importantly, he is willing to walk away the moment he senses that the energy does not match his own. He does not negotiate respect. He does not beg for attention. He does not twist himself into a version he thinks she will like. His confidence allows him to initiate without chasing and to show interest without desperation. This is why when he goes quiet, the silence echoes. A woman can feel the difference between a man who withdraws because he is intimidated and a man who withdraws because he respects himself. The confident man's silence is grounded in self-worth. It is the quiet certainty of someone who knows he is enough with or without her validation. And this creates a psychological shift inside her. She begins to wonder why he isn't trying harder, why he isn't seeking her approval the way other men do, why he can walk away without flinching. His confidence expressed through both action and restraint forces her to see him differently. She recognizes courage where others shrink. She senses discipline where others collapse. This naturally elevates him in her mind. Rejection does not destabilize him because he does not see it as a reflection of his value. This resilience is extremely rare in men today, which makes it magnetic. Women respect men who move through the world with this level of internal stability. And because they respect him, they chase him. They lean in. They try harder. His ignoring becomes impactful precisely because it was never intended as a strategy, but as an extension of who he is. Understanding this leads us to another powerful truth, one that reveals why high-value men are often less available in the first place. It is not that they choose to ignore women. It is that their lives simply do not revolve around them. The next reason explains how purpose shapes a man's presence and makes his absence even more compelling. When a man lacks purpose, he begins to orbit around the nearest source of emotional stimulation. And often that source is a woman. Without a clear direction for his life, without goals that stretch him, challenge him, or demand his focus, he becomes consumed by the pursuit of affection. His mood depends on her replies. His confidence depends on her attention. His identity becomes a fragile structure built on uncertainty. This is why so many men fall into unhealthy attachment. The absence of purpose leaves a void that they try to fill with romance. But women instinctively sense when a man's world is too small and his needs too large. Nothing suffocates attraction more quickly. High-value men exist on the opposite end of this spectrum. Their lives are built around ambition, mission, and growth. They wake up with commitments, goals, dreams, and responsibilities that require their full attention. Their schedule is not shaped by emotional cravings, but by discipline. This naturally limits how much time and energy they can give to women, not because they are uninterested, but because their purpose outranks temporary emotion. When a man is genuinely focused on something bigger than himself, ignoring does not become a tactic. It becomes a byproduct of his lifestyle. He is not avoiding her. He is simply busy building a life worth sharing. This is what creates the powerful distinction between need and choice. A man without purpose clings to a woman. A man with purpose chooses her. The difference is felt immediately. His absence becomes intriguing because it signals momentum. His time feels valuable because it is scarce. His presence feels strong because it comes from a man who stands on solid ground. Women find this energy irresistible, not because it is manipulative, but because it is masculine in its purest form, directed, disciplined, and anchored in something beyond emotional gratification. When a woman encounters this kind of man, she does not feel like the center of his universe, and paradoxically, that increases her desire. She wants to be part of his world because it is rich, meaningful, and full of motion. She realizes that she must earn a place in his life rather than simply being handed one. His purpose becomes the force that elevates him, and his focus becomes the quiet signal that he cannot be consumed by a single relationship. Yet even the strongest men must confront themselves in solitude. Purpose gives a man direction, but what he does with his silence and independence reveals an entirely different layer of high-value behavior. And that brings us to the next powerful psychological truth, the ability to be completely comfortable alone. Most men fear loneliness, though they rarely admit it. They enter relationships not from desire, but from emotional hunger, using a woman's presence as a shield against the silence they cannot bear. They chase affection not because they are in love, but because they are terrified of being left with their own thoughts, their own insecurities, their own unfulfilled potential. This fear makes them clingy, anxious, and overly accommodating. It turns them into men who settle for anyone who gives them attention, rather than men who choose partners from a place of strength. Women sense this fear instantly, and once they sense it, respect begins to fade. High-value men live in an entirely different emotional reality. They do not run from solitude, they thrive in it. Time alone becomes an environment for growth, clarity, discipline, and mental sharpness. It is where they build themselves, confront themselves, and transform themselves. Because they are comfortable with their own company, they do not accept a relationship just to fill a void. They do not cling, they do not panic when a woman pulls away, and they do not crumble at the idea of being single. Their independence gives them a relaxed, grounded presence that cannot be faked. It is impossible to control a man who is not afraid of losing you. It is impossible to manipulate a man who stands steady with or without your attention. This emotional self-sufficiency makes them profoundly attractive. Women feel a sense of unpredictability around such men, not because they play games, but because they cannot be pushed around by emotional pressure. Their solitude becomes a source of strength, and their silence becomes a message: I choose relationships, I do not need them. This shifts the dynamic entirely. He is not operating from fear, but from preference. And that makes every gesture, every moment of attention, every decision he makes feel more intentional. Because he is comfortable being alone, ignoring becomes effortless. It is not a weapon. It is simply a reflection of his internal stability. If she brings chaos, he steps back. If she disrespects him, he detaches. If she tests boundaries, he does not engage. His peace matters more than her reaction, and he protects that peace with confidence. This forces a woman to step into her higher self around him, because she knows that losing him means losing a man who will never beg, never chase out of desperation, and never shrink to maintain harmony. But solitude is only one piece of the equation. Even the strongest man encounters situations where emotions run high, where conflict threatens connection. And it is in those moments that the next truth becomes clear. High-value men ignore, not to punish, but to protect something far more valuable, their inner peace. Many men mistakenly believe that strength is shown through constant engagement, through arguing, defending themselves, and explaining their innocence whenever a woman becomes emotional or confrontational. They think that responding to every accusation or correcting every misunderstanding proves leadership. But in reality, this only reinforces the behavior they hope will stop. When a man reacts to disrespect, he rewards it with attention. When he argues, he validates the chaos. When he tries to win the emotional battle, he enters a game he is destined to lose. Low-value men fall into this trap, constantly believing that silence is weakness, when in truth, reactive engagement is the real weakness. High-value men understand something far more powerful. Peace is sacred. They do not allow any one woman or not to disturb their emotional stability. When confronted with tantrums, provocations, passive-aggressive remarks, or attempts to manipulate them, they simply withdraw. Not coldly, not with resentment, but with clarity. Their silence becomes a boundary, a message delivered without raising their voice. I do not participate in disrespect. This type of distance teaches emotional discipline far more effectively than arguments ever could. It forces the other person to confront their behavior without having a man absorb or soften the impact of their actions. For women, this is a profound psychological shift. They are accustomed to men who react instantly, who defend themselves, who take the bait. But a man who refuses to be pulled into emotional conflict commands a different type of respect. She realizes she cannot control him with impulsive outbursts. She sees that his peace matters more to him than winning an argument. She senses that emotional chaos cannot shake him. This stability is rare and deeply attractive because it feels safe and authoritative. The moment she understands that he will leave, the moment disrespect appears, something changes in her. She adjusts. She becomes more thoughtful in her communication. She becomes more aware of her emotional patterns. Fear of losing him is not rooted in insecurity, but in recognition. This man will not tolerate behavior that damages the relationship. His ignoring is not punishment. It is a refusal to water weeds. His silence protects the connection by refusing to feed negativity. And yet, silence alone is not enough. High-value men do not hide behind it. They pair it with clarity, directness, and intention. Their communication is simple, masculine, and unmistakable. And this leads us to the next truth, a reason why their silence carries even greater weight. One of the most common complaints women have about men today is not that they are too bold or too assertive, but that they are indirect. They hint instead of speak. They text excessively instead of expressing themselves clearly. They try to impress through quantity rather than quality. This indirectness makes women lose respect because it signals uncertainty. It shows that a man fears rejection more than he values authenticity. High-value men do not fall into this pattern. Their communication is intentional, concise, and unmistakable. They say what they mean without hiding behind jokes, emojis, or endless messages. When they want to see a woman, they say so. When they are not interested, they do not pretend to be. This clarity is masculine, rare, and deeply grounding. Because they communicate directly, their silence carries a different meaning than that of the average man. When they stop speaking, it is not because they are confused, intimidated, or hoping she will chase. Their silence communicates boundaries, not insecurity. It signals that they will not invest energy into someone who is inconsistent, disrespectful, or emotionally immature. This is why their quietness creates a subtle pressure that women feel instantly. She knows he is not disappearing out of fear. She knows he is not hiding. She knows he is not playing games. She senses that he simply refuses to waste time. And time in the mind of a high-value man is his greatest currency. This creates a psychological shift inside her. She fears being replaced not because he threatens it, but because she knows he is the type of man who will not fight for a connection that does not flow naturally. His directness forces her to drop her games, her tests, her need for emotional theatrics. She realizes he responds only to authenticity. She adjusts because she wants to keep his presence in her life. And that presence is never guaranteed. Meanwhile, most men unknowingly destroy their attractiveness by over-communicating, mistaking verbosity for connection. They flood the conversation to prove interest, but in doing so, they drain the mystery that attraction requires. High-value men do the opposite. They express interest once with clarity and then allow their boundaries to speak for them. In the end, the goal is not to imitate the behavior of high-value men, but to become one from within. Every lesson comes back to self-respect, self-discipline, purpose, emotional independence, and a mindset rooted in abundance rather than fear. These qualities do not just improve relationships, they elevate a man's entire life. When desperation disappears, dignity replaces it. When chaos is no longer entertained, peace takes its place. When a man stops begging for respect, he finally receives it. And that is the true transformation. Not louder confidence, but deeper certainty. Not more effort, but more value. Not harder chasing, but stronger presence. Once a man understands this, he no longer wonders why some men naturally earn respect while others constantly fight for it. He already knows the answer because he has become the answer.